Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
As all this news is coming in, most of it not seeming all that great for President Trump. Dana, you have some new reporting.
I talked to a source familiar with President Trump's thinking who said that the president is down, obviously tired, which is understandable, but not feeling all that great, despite the public bluster that we've seen and heard from his campaign, from his children, that the president is seeing what's happening. He is seeing that in some of these key states that will determine whether he is president or not, his lead is shrinking. Or if Joe Biden is ahead, notwithstanding what we just saw, this is before that just happened, it's just not looking that good for the president. And the sense from the source that I spoke to is that the president is starting to see this slip away. That's the mood of the president. Now, could that change like this with changes in the votes? Of course. But it also kind of dovetails with some reporting that we had earlier from our colleague Kevin Liptak, who said the president is calling to allies, saying that he doesn't understand the strategy that his campaign is using to kind of have these lawsuits in various states. Why didn't they try this more aggressively before the votes were counted? So there's some hand-wringing going on behind the scenes while there is some, public bravado. Yeah, quite different.
And I don't blame him for being confused about his legal team's strategy, because it is a little confounding when you actually look at what is going on. We've been talking all night about the way in which the strategy is talking out of one side of their mouth in Arizona and in Nevada, and then out of another in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Michigan. So it is confusing. And earlier in the year, the president really did push his team and the RNC to have a very aggressive legal strategy. And I think he really had hoped that a lot of this stuff would be resolved before we got to this point. And much of it actually had been resolved and litigated in the courts, which is why you're seeing some of the legal challenges that they're putting out now are, as we've discussed, fairly thin. And so I'm not surprised to see that the president finds it to be a somewhat unconvincing case.
But do you
think
that his issue is that he's not finding their legal strategy now to be up to the standards that he wants, or he doesn't understand why they're not able to stop the counting of votes? I mean, that seems more like in keeping with Donald Trump. His legal team was fairly aggressively out there. Yeah. I mean, they were trying to stop mail-in ballots in any number of states, including the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I mean, the problem is that just because he's president, he's not able just to stop mail-in ballots. He's not able just to stop the counting of ballots. I think, with all due respect, I think you're giving him a little bit too much credit.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's a little bit of both, that he wants to stop the ballots from being counted. But again, I'm sure he's not blind to the fact that these cases that are being brought are long shots.
Exactly.
I mean, they're just hard to...
But that's not his legal team's fault.
Well, no, it's not. But as we've been saying all night, they are throwing everything they can up against this wall. The president obviously wants to win. He wants the ballots to perhaps not be counted. But I think he, as someone who, as you pointed out, is very litigious, he understands that these cases are not as rock solid as he.
That's exactly right. I think that he's just It sounds to me like he is just voicing his frustration, and the one thing he can hang it on right now, because it's the way that they are being active in the Trump campaign, is by the lawsuits right now. And because he actually has so much experience in the courts, maybe not in election law, but experience in the courts, that he is, seeing that the campaign is just kind of trying to find ways to publicly say, we don't believe this, we're going to challenge this, but it's not necessarily something that is really, he's not standing on firm ground.
But he doesn't have experience winning in courts. He has experience with completely frivolous lawsuits. Yeah. Well, let's table this for a second. I want to go to Caitlin Collins at the White House, who can give us some more insight into President Trump's frustrations about what's going on. Caitlin?
Well, it's so interesting to hear you guys talk about the legal strategy, because this legal strategy came about because after Fox News called Arizona for Joe Biden last night, something that we should note CNN has not done yet. I am told by sources that's when the president went into this kind of panic mode with aides after thinking that he was going to win and pull this off, that he started instructing them to start filing these lawsuits and start to pursuing litigation that we have seen play out all day. And so that is what campaign aides have really spent the day doing. And some have conceded, in part, Jake, it's so they can buy themselves more time as they are waiting on votes in places like Arizona to come in. The other thing the president has spent the day doing, since we have not seen him in person today, and the White House has called a lid, meaning we are not expecting any appearances from him, though we could hear from him, of course, on Twitter tonight, Jake, is angrily calling Republican governors, these people who he believes are his allies, as he is trying to will what is happening and what we are seeing playing out from actually happening. And that includes Doug Ducey of Arizona, Brian Kemp of Georgia, and Ron DeSantis of Florida, I'm told by sources. He has been angrily calling them because he is not happy with what he's seeing. Of course, Florida is a different situation. I think that's more of a venting situation from what I've understood so far, but that is what the president has spent his day doing. So he is angrily calling these Republican governors, but casting doubt on the legal strategy that he has told his own aides to pursue. And of course, if you talk to the campaign aides who are working on this, some of them obviously do not believe some of these lawsuits will be successful, but they feel basically like they've run out of options at this point. And when the president feels like he's backed into a corner, often throughout the decades of his life before he was even in office, his go-to strategy has been to sue or to file lawsuits or to try to mount some kind of legal challenge to stop what is happening from happening.
Thank you, Caitlin Collins. That's exactly what I thought was going on. The idea that he's waging these frivolous lawsuits because he's telling them to do it. Anyway, Caitlin, thank you so much. Let's go to Arlette Saenz, who's with the Biden team in Wilmington, Delaware. What are you hearing from Team Biden, Arlette? There's obviously still a narrowing race in Arizona. We don't know what's happening in Nevada, a narrowing race in Pennsylvania, and, of course, in Georgia.
Well, Jake, they are closely watching these results coming in Arizona, but at this point, they are still projecting confidence about his standing in that state. The Biden campaign acknowledges that the margin could tighten in a county like Maricopa County, but they don't expect that his current standing will be overcome, even as the Trump campaign has pushed that narrative over the course of the day. Now, Arizona and Nevada, another state the Biden campaign is looking to hold on to. Those are states that Joe Biden only visited once as the Democratic nominee, which is quite the contrast to the time and resources he devoted to those blue walls he was trying to reclaim this time around. Now, the Biden campaign started the day projecting confidence about that blue wall in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And at this point, they have had two of those three states called in their favor. Now, heading and looking forward to Pennsylvania, the Biden campaign says they still remain confident as those votes continue to be counted, and say that they will remain vigilant about ensuring that every last vote is counted in that state.
It is Thursday, the 5th of November of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. And I know grits aren't necessarily part of New Orleans cuisine, but the best grits I've ever had was in New Orleans, so I'm paying homage. Well, the vote still continues, or I mean the count still continues, thankfully, because we want every vote counted. Now, I know that there are the maggot cult out there at counting facilities, not just in Arizona and elsewhere, but elsewhere. They're being really bullying about it, trying to be Brooks Brother rioters of sorts. And in some instances, they're saying count the votes. And in other instances, they're saying don't count the votes. So, yeah, I know. If your candidate is in the lead, you don't want any more votes counted. And when they're losing, you want them all counted. Count those votes. There might be some that are hiding. Okay, well, we know the political understanding from that group. That's not democracy. That's not even a high school election. But they want what they want, and they're going to try to force us to accept it. We're not going to let them, because democracy will prevail. And I would be quite happy to marginalize these people, make them pariahs. Oh, we're supposed to reach across the aisle, the boulevard. We're supposed to make friends with people who are carrying long rifles and saying, hey, fuck your feelings. We're supposed to make nice with that. Now we have to consider being the good neighbor. We have always been the good neighbor, and we've been slapped across the face. And now it's time for the neighborhood to take some action. All right? You know how it works in a neighborhood. If shunning doesn't work, well, then I guess we'll have to get a little bit more serious, won't we? And that seriousness can take many forms. When Germany denazified, they actually went very micro in their macro approach. Our reconstruction to try to root out that which allowed slavery to flourish in this nation was never successful. In fact, it was fought back against by the same goons that are surrounding these polling counting facilities. Oh, you don't think so? I'm telling you, there is a photograph at the Overlook Hotel for a New Year's Eve party, and you'll see each and every one of those people in that facility of evil. Okay? I mean, Stephen King sometimes, some people will say he's a good storyteller, terrible writer. I mean, his grammar, but great storyteller. And he pretty much presaged what is an understanding of I would say a peculiarly American type of evil that seems to permeate the bloodlines of a certain end of the spectrum. Will we ever be able to root out that evil, that original sin? Will we? I don't know. So, short of that, I guess we might have to take a few more actions. Like condemn the property, maybe. Eminent domain. I don't know. Something has to happen, because re-educating isn't going to work, because you have to educate them first. Then you can re-educate them. So I guess we start with the education part, and the only way to do that is to, I don't know, sequester them, quarantine them in an area so that they, are pretty much forced to sit down and listen, because they sure don't now. They're still out there yelling, bellowing with long rifles, saying, this is what we want, and you better accept it. And we're saying, no, we're not going to. Count every vote. Okay, democracy, I guess, does hang in the balance. There's all sorts of considerations about how, once again, in spite of everything that we know, suddenly Trump has all this support that we didn't know about. Where are these votes coming from? I don't want to go too far into the deep hole of conspiracies. But it makes me wonder, how did these senators win their seats? I think that we need to do some forensic autopsies on the vote. And they do. And as we heard last time, way after the fact, yeah, Russia manipulated quite a bit. They're afraid to say that there were votes flipped. But you know, the forensic analysis did see that suppression, kicking people off the voting rolls, was probably much more effective than the actual flipping of votes, which, by all reportage and even these reports from the government forensic analyses, speculates that that could have happened, but they're not going to say. Because if that starts happening, yeah, people might not want to vote, and we want people to vote because we need to get past the margin of cheating. And somehow, once again, it's back into the margin of cheating. How did that happen? Oh, there's some people out there that are just anti-authoritarian types, and they just, the secret Trump voter, the shy Trump voter. I've never met a shy Trump voter. Where did these votes come from? Well, right now, I think that we might be heartened to know that a lot of these votes that are being counted now are the mail-in ballots that Trump has tried so hard to suppress. And in some instances, he's been a bit successful, and we'll see if, will justice prevail? I don't know. Right now, justice should probably move on and let you know what's on the rest of the menu, because we do have a curated show, and not so much into the presidential politics of it all, but there was an election, and there was a lot of things that were elected. Indeed. So what was on the rest of the menu here at the top, of course? That was a breakdown about Trump aides describing him as feeling down as Biden approaches 270. And we'll see. Oh, it looks like, Trump is now tweeted out in all caps, "Stop the count!" No. People voted and they got their ballots in, and they're going to count those ballots, you monster. All righty, on the rest of the menu here, San Francisco voters approved higher taxes on CEOs and big businesses, and it's about time. Alabama voters approved an amendment to strip racist language from its 119-year-old racist constitution. It's taken them a long time, but they're finally doing it. And 2 Oregon counties voted to join Idaho. I don't know. Maybe we should let them have them. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a police brutality activist was blocked from leaving Nigeria as officials confiscated her passport. And an Australian bookmaker paid out $17 million on a Biden victory ahead of the official results. I guess they're confident about the results. Let's see if he's right. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Couple of scares yesterday that took most of our attention for the day. I have a teenage granddaughter going through all the attendant angst that teenagers go through, and those of you who have had teenagers or even been one know what I'm talking about. So, there's issues that we as a family need to, embrace. Also, my mom, my elderly mom, 83, she's a tough old gal, I got to tell you. Well, she took a tumble and just banged the heck out of her. And I was standing right there, just right out of reach. And she face planted. And in some ways, maybe it was better because she might have broken her wrists if she'd gotten her hands in front of her. But anyway, she did bruise up her arm pretty bad. Took the brunt of the fall on her face. So the inside of her mouth is cut up, and she's going to probably have a black eye. Pretty good gash on the bridge of her nose where her glasses are, rest. What else? We were afraid of concussion. Nothing that showed up for that, thankfully. No broken bones, some bruised ribs. The shoulder hurts a little bad on the right side there, and those ribs. Nothing broken and nothing cracked. So lucked out on that. But boy, she's going to be uncomfortable for a few days. But that was quite a bit of a scare. We went to ER, so there was no messing around. I just went straight there. And, that took up most of the day. But, hey, I don't care. At least I know that all we have to do is keep her comfortable, get her to breathe in this little breathing apparatus to expand her rib cage and her lungs. Because, you have rib injuries. You don't want to breathe very deep. And pretty soon, you could get pneumonia. I could explain how that happens, but, there's some puddling that happens if you don't expand your lungs all the way, especially when you're old. So we have that, and that was a bit of a scare, and all of this it just is a reminder of our own mortality. And I don't know, for me, that's less of a concern than the mortality of those I love. And am I being selfish to keep them here? Yes, I am. I am indeed. Hey, if you go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. My Gunner the English Bulldog is a snoozing sous chef. I apologize, but he's snoozing big time today. If you look to the leftish from the chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, there is the link to our Patreon page. And thank you to those of you who have been so very generous right now. I am getting the machinery to at least part of it, of the workhorse machinery, and we're going to pick up the broadcaster. I don't have so much of a time limit on the broadcaster, the MacBook, but that will be replaced by the end of the year. But the other workhorse that I'm using, the PC that I'm using for a lot of the work that happens here at the station, will be replaced hopefully tomorrow, if not today. At least have it on site, and then I can start getting the software into it, and then, kicking the tires. Light the fires and kick the tires. Or do you kick the tires and then light the fires? If you light the fires and kick the tires, you might be in big trouble. Okay. Anyway, thank you to those of you who have been so generous so that we can pay our bills and then get this attendant machinery and software to replace these workhorses that have been working like horses for, over 4 years for this tandem. And then there was a previous tandem that worked before that. And we've been doing this for almost 10 years. It's going to be 10 years come February. The official 10 years, of 24/7, 365 continuous resistance radio. Now, for those of you who have not considered, and I know you probably hate hearing this at this time of year, but if you would consider maybe buying us an espresso-type coffee drink, and then instead of sending the coffee, you sent those monies our way, we are able to stretch those dollars way, way, way beyond compare, pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue resisting as the founders originally intended. All right, I got that out. Anyway, thank you to those of you who have been so generous, and we give a pre-thank you to those of you who are considering doing so. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio, go to, on Twitter, by the way, go to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and really a lot more, too. Thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of @Justice Putnam on Twitter, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Post that up on Twitter and other social media platforms because that's what you do. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Okay. You know what I would like to do in terms of changing the fabric of America? Because something's woven in that's really weird. And I'd like to get rid of the prosperity gospel types like Paula White. Ugh, God, talk about cringeworthy. Oh, my God. And I mean that literally. My God. All right. Enough of this. Let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Yeah, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Keep counting those votes. Daisy Nguyen of the Associated Press brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe. In an effort to address economic disparity laid bare by the coronavirus pandemic, San Francisco voters went to the polls and overwhelmingly approved several tax measures targeting property owners and big businesses with CEOs who are paid far higher than their average workers. Under the new law, any company whose top executive earns 100 times more than their average worker will pay an extra. Now, look, this is going to just really burden them. They will pay 0.1% surcharge on its annual business tax payment. If a CEO makes 200 times more than the average employee, the surcharge increases to 0.2%. 300 times gets a 0.3% surcharge, and so on, and so on, and so on. That's not socialism, but that is exactly how it used to work back in the day, like when they called Eisenhower a commie. Voters also agreed to sweeping business tax changes that will lead to a higher tax rate for many tech companies. Well, I guess they're going to have to move to Minnesota. And I'm not putting down Minnesota. But look, it's not San Francisco, no matter how much they try to tell us that. And the higher transfer tax on property sales valued between $10 million and $25 million, okay? I know that's just, a flat at the clock tower that is falling apart. But, hey, we're not going to shed any tears if penthouse dwellers have to cough up, the San Francisco League of Pissed Off Voters wrote in their voter guide. The results show that San Franciscans are concerned about growing economic inequality, City Supervisor Matt Haney, the author of the measure titled The Overpaid Executive Tax. The very wealthy are gaining more and more. They've gotten much richer during the pandemic while everyone else has remained stagnant. I would say that it's been worse than stagnant. We need the wealth that has been generated in the city to be shared more broadly with workers and residents, he said. Critics call the surcharge a blatant attempt at redistribution of wealth and criticize raising business taxes in the middle of a recession. Yeah, but we're not talking about small businesses. Okay? We're talking about gougers. We're talking about profiteers. And wealth distribution? Please. How much did Bezos, Zuckerberg, Gates, et al. Make during the pandemic? Don't talk to me. Don't talk to us about the evils of wealth distribution. Jay Reeves of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Alabama voters have approved an amendment that would begin the process of deleting racist language from the state's 119-year-old Constitution, which was approved to entrench white supremacy as state law during the Jim Crow era, which is just a nice way of saying that their constitution is racist. Voters in the majority white conservative state rejected similar proposals twice since 2000, but the measure passed easily in balloting on Tuesday. Glenn Crowell, a retired restaurateur and registered Republican who was black, said he voted to strip away the old phrasing, which the amendment sponsors viewed as an embarrassment and potential roadblock to economic development, and indeed it is. I just want to get rid of that language. It just doesn't make any sense nowadays, said Crowell, age 63 of Montgomery. Courts have long since struck down the legalized segregation that was enshrined in the 1901 Alabama Constitution, but language banning mixed-race marriage, allowing poll taxes, and mandating school segregation remains, with more than 1.7 million votes cast. The amendment passed with 67% support, which means 33% of the toxic part is still there. How are we going to deal with that? Have we ever been able to deal with it? No, we haven't. That means more than 585,000 people voted against it. The ballot didn't mention race, and some voters might not have even known what the amendment involved, because, after all, it's Alabama. Douglas Perry of the Oregonian brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Voters in Union and Jefferson counties say they want their slice of Oregon to become part of Idaho. To be more precise, a majority of residents who cast ballots in those rural counties decided to require that their county commissioners hold meetings about relocating the border. In Jefferson County, 5,655 residents, or 51.02%, voted for the measure, and in Union County, 7,401, or 52.42%, supported it. The measure was also on the ballot in Wallowa County, but fell just short with 2,429 votes, and 2,475 against. So 50.47 in Wallowa County decided, we don't want to be part of Idaho. Come on, this is Oregon. A similar measure failed in Douglas County with 26,404 voting in favor. And looks like 34,621 voted against. I want to thank all those who voted and those who got signatures to put the measure on the ballot. Chief Petitioner Mike McCarter told the Oregonian, "We're a grassroots movement. This is a beginning." Really? Are you serious? Have you no idea what this whole secessionist movement has been about for about 20 years? Yeah. We're talking driven by Vlad. So much so that the secessionist movements and the border movements' last effort in doing this, those petitioners are now living in Russia because that's where they came from. Now, I'm not saying McCarter here is Russian, but he is a useful dupe. Or a useful idiot. One of the two. McCarter, a retired Lapine resident who heads up Move Oregon's border for a greater Idaho, is seeking to have 22 counties total in eastern and southern Oregon. They're trying to make my county become a part of Idaho, and we're not going to allow it. and in eastern and southern Oregon to vote on the idea of Idaho taking over rural Oregon. And Oregon has 36 counties, and he wants 22 to go to Idaho. He says rural Oregons love Oregon, but would prefer to live under Idaho's more conservative governance because there's a lot of racism in Oregon. In fact, there's so much racism in Oregon, Oregon's constitution was almost as racist as Alabama's. In fact, some might argue it was even more racist. The coronavirus pandemic this year made the Move Oregon's border signature collection effort more difficult than anticipated. Well, God does work in mysterious ways now, doesn't she? All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Both Sides Now. Aaron Sorkin's latest film, The Trial of the Chicago Seven, takes us back to Chicago in 1968 and the politically motivated prosecution, or if you will, persecution, of 7 members of a handful of different anti-Vietnam War movements and one Black Panther. Most of these defendants had come to peacefully protest during the Democratic National Convention, only to have Mayor Daley embroil them in an orgy of police violence. Now, Steven Spielberg's producer first pitched Sorkin way back in 2007, so that makes this film surprisingly timely. If you love Sorkin's TV work, you should know that this film feels very different. It's still set in a Sorkin world, where very intelligent people have a difficult job that reaches out to the public in some way, that both requires and values their expertise, but here Sorkin's dialogue is tighter and his pace snappier than you're used to. He even breaks up his signature walk and talk in the beginning by having each defendant cut into the previous one with an inappropriate continuation to what has just been said. The montage dramatizes our heroes' eventual defense to their conspiracy charge that the only thing these people had in common was a cause, a time, a place, and Richard Nixon's hatred. This division also speaks to Sorkin's larger point, and for this reading I take a cue from Jeet Heer's article on this film in The Nation. Effectively, Heer sees Sorkin greatly influenced by King. Yeah, not that King. Like many comfortable white moderates, Sorkin looks at protester versus repressor and bemoans the rift revealed when the ignored clash with the despotic. Can't we all just get along, he cries. We're all Americans, you know. And this movie does a fair job of making that point. Sadly, it would be more convincing if Sorkin hadn't had to fabricate one prosecutor's amenable personality, make up one sympathetic agent provocateur out of whole cloth, and bring us home with a moving and totally fictional ending. Still, The Trial of the Chicago Seven is worth a watch. I mean, in a straight role, I can't believe Sacha Baron Cohen is so good. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
I'm Scott Hirschberger with Scientific American as an American Association for the Advancement of Science Mass Media Science and Engineering Fellow. And here's a short piece from the October 2020 issue of the magazine in the section called Advances, Dispatches from the Frontiers of Science, Technology, and Medicine. The article is titled Quick Hits, and it's a rundown of some stories from around the globe. From Mexico, in now flooded caves, researchers discovered the oldest known ochre mines in the Americas. Around 12,000 years ago, inhabitants of the Yucatan Peninsula extracted the red pigment, possibly for use as an antiseptic and sunscreen, or for symbolic purposes such as body painting. From Italy, a massive bloom of pink algae, triggered by low snowfall and high spring and summer temperatures, could accelerate the melting of the Presena Glacier by causing the ice to absorb more sunlight. From Botswana, at least 350 elephants have dropped dead in the Okavango Panhandle since March, and live elephants have acted disoriented or seemed partially paralyzed. With poaching and anthrax ruled out as potential causes, investigators suspect an unknown disease. From Libya, a 7-million-year-old crocodile skull suggests the prehistoric animals may have traveled from Africa to the Americas. Computerized tomography of the fossil, found in Libya, revealed a slight bump in the middle of the snout, a feature of modern American crocodiles, but not their African counterparts. from Polynesia. Through a genetic analysis of modern-day Polynesians and indigenous people from South America's Pacific coast, scientists concluded the two groups came into contact between AD 1150 and 1230. Where the transoceanic encounter occurred remains unknown, but the team suspects eastern Polynesia. And from the United Arab Emirates, the successful launch of a Mars orbiter called Hope marked the first interplanetary mission conducted by an Arab nation. Carrying instruments to study the red planet's daily and seasonal weather, the spacecraft is set to enter Martian orbit in February 2021. That was Quick Hits. I'm Scott Hirschberger.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Voting is the core of democracy. So, are there some simple steps to take to make the United States more of a democracy? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. For starters, let's make it easier to register to vote. Allow same-day registration. Stop voter purges. End felony disenfranchisement. Make mail-in voting a norm, as it has been in 5 states prior to 2020. Allow no excuse necessary absentee ballots. Give adequate resources to the U.S. Postal Service so that ballots can be timely delivered. Make early voting a permanent feature of our elections. Increase the number of days of early voting. And increase the number of polling places so that voters who are voting in person don't have to stand in line for 6 or 8 hours in the heat or the cold. At least replace the 1,700 polling places that have been discontinued in recent years. Make sure that there are an adequate number of drop boxes. Reinstate the protections of the Voting Rights Act so that people seeking to vote are not discriminated against on the basis of race. Make sure that there is a paper trail for ballots so that we can have assurances that votes are in fact counted and that recounts when necessary can be conducted accurately and fairly. In a word, do everything possible to allow every eligible voter to vote and then count every ballot. We can do this. It's not that complicated. We just need to find the will to make our country a far better democracy. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1916. That was the day when what came to be known as the Everett Massacre took place in Washington State. The Everett Shingle Workers Union had gone out on strike in May. Organizers from the industrial workers of the world came to the area to support the strike and to make a stand for free speech. Over the summer, tensions began to mount. The police began to arrest IWW speechmakers. Then, in August, violence erupted between strikebreakers and picketers at the Jameson Mill. The IWW decided to bring in a group of about 300 members for a free speech rally. They came from Seattle by 2 steamer boats. But the first boat was met at the docks by the sheriff and a large group of armed deputies. A gun battle broke out. One passenger, Ernest Nordstrom, told the harrowing tale of what happened to the Seattle Union Record, saying, quote, "I couldn't swear where the first shot came from. but as it comes to me, I thought the first shot was a warning shot not to go ashore. After that, there were shots, gee whiz, all kinds of shots. And when they commenced, all ran to the other side and the boat began to tip. The passengers avoided capsizing the boat and turned around to flee back to Seattle. At least 5 IWW members on board were killed, along with 2 of the deputies. After the violence, the Shingle Workers Union called off their strike. 74 IWW members were arrested, but only 1 stood trial. None were convicted. Ernest Nordstrom followed up with, "I'm sure there is no excuse for this whatsoever. There need have been no bloodshed." For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Thursday, November 5th, 2020. I'm Mark Belanger. How do you organize workers during a pandemic? That was the question addressed by union organizers in a recent webinar conducted by Education International. EI is the global union for teachers and other education workers. One of the resource people in the webinar was Jane McAlvey, a union organizer in the United States. She started her presentation showing a number of slides.
What I showed was a picture of 34,000 teachers walking out, and a beautiful picture of 34,000 teachers in Los Angeles walking out. And to get there, they had to practice a mechanism called structure tests. And the structure is the school site. And so what's different between organizing and mobilizing is that in mobilizing, which is what most teachers' unions and most unions are doing, whether it's in Europe or around the world, or definitely in the United States, what it mostly means we're doing is we're talking to the teachers who want to talk to us. We're only making an effort. We call a meeting. If we're doing a good job, we call a meeting and people show up at a meeting. And it's never a very high percentage of the members who show up at a meeting because who wants to go to an extra meeting? We generally run not very good meetings and then we rely on who shows up and we blame the people who don't show up, right? We literally say, well, we called a meeting and if those teachers didn't show up to the meeting, too bad. That's actually the opposite of organizing. Organizing means we wake up in the morning and we have a plan, literally, to engage every single teacher into every single school every single week. And it means we're spending most of our time talking to the teachers who do not come to our meetings, are not in our social media feeds, and do not think they want to talk to us. That's the difference between a mobilizing approach or an advocacy approach, either one of them, and what we call a deep organizing approach. In the United States, the biggest strikes, which have led to the biggest improvements in standards for students and learning and teacher outcomes, has been the unions that are practicing the organizing approach by which they make a plan every single week about how to engage every single teacher in every single school. That's what organizing is. And it's very different than the approach that most teacher unions rely on, which is let's talk to whoever shows up.
Another participant in the EI webinar about organizing in the education sector was John Hegarty, an organizer for the National Education Union, the NEU, in the United Kingdom.
Where we are in terms of organizing is we're 10 years into a project. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. You know, our organizing strategy as the National Union has gone on for a long time. And it's involved building rep structures, building training, recruiting activists over years. But in terms of what we did during COVID, there were some digital tools that we used. We used a lot of Zoom meetings. At one point, we had 20,000 members on a Zoom call. We used Call Hub as a technology with one of our aims was to phone every single one of our workplace reps. So that's 10,000 reps. We got through to nearly 4,000 and spoke to them. And one of the things that we were asking our reps to do was to meet with members, gather a petition as to people's opposition to wider reopening, and take that to the school management, which was a structure test. Because one of the things that was happening was reps were then coming back to us and saying, not everybody wants to sign it. What do I do? And we were then using those models that James talked about. We were saying, okay, you're going to have to talk to the people who aren't on our side. This is how we do it. This is a structured organizing conversation. What you're doing is a structure test. You're going to build power. And the result of that work over the last few months of the crisis is we've recruited 50,000 new members. We've recruited 3,500 new workplace reps. We've trained over 3,500 activists. And the union, when it came to the government's demand for wider reopening, we managed to stop 70% of schools opening more widely.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River. In the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of around 70 to 72. Mostly cloudy skies during the morning, and it's going to give way to a few showers late. Winds will be out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and we're expecting, just about 1/10 of an inch this afternoon and this evening. And then we're going to be getting a drenching starting tomorrow and going through the weekend. Oh my. Lows tonight will be in the low 40s. Steady rain this evening. Showers continuing overnight. Winds out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Expecting about 1/4 of an inch of rain dropping overnight. And then rain showers in the morning tomorrow, Friday, with a high of only around 50. And it will evolve into a more steady rain in the afternoon, expecting about 1/3 to 1/2 of an inch. And then even more rain for Saturday and Sunday. And then snow forecast in the middle of next week. Oh, I guess we're moving right through fall into winter. Confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have spiked from 1,980-something yesterday to 2,049 today. And we've increased our confirmed deceased from 7 to 8. Still a gross undercount on the death totals. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window of the mothership here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index in the region is actually quite good at 18 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.27 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 50 degrees and sunny. Paris is 52 and sunny. Rome is 68 and fair. Kyiv is 45 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 54 and fair. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 55 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 58 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 58 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Ruby George of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Nigerian immigration officials blocked a prominent anti-police brutality activist from leaving the country and confiscated her passport, she told Reuters yesterday, Wednesday. There was no immediate response from immigration authorities to requests for comment on the assertion of Modupe Odell, a lawyer who has helped arrange legal defense for protesters campaigning against police violence. Odell said that when she tried to board an international flight at Murtala Mohammed Airport in Lagos on the 1st of November, immigration authorities told her that she was under military investigation and thus barred from leaving Nigeria. When she met immigration authorities on November 3rd, they declined to return her passport and did not tell her why the military is investigating her or outline any charges. Odell said the military has not contacted her. Army spokesman Sagir Musa referred questions on Odell's case and on whether any other protesters were under investigation or barred from travel to immigration officials. And of course, immigration officials did not respond to calls or WhatsApp messages, nor did the Department of State Services, the security agency that would bar Nigerians from leaving or entering the country for security reasons. Nigeria's interior minister denied local news reports that said it had compiled a no-fly list, saying that any such list was not the responsibility of the ministry or its associated agencies. Peaceful demonstrations against police violence turned bloody on October 20th when witnesses and rights group Amnesty International reported that military and police opened fire on protesters, killing at least 12. Odell provided help to protesters as part of a group of volunteer lawyers trying to secure the release of individuals arrested for protesting against abuses by a police unit known as the Special Anti-Robbery Squad.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. An Australian bookmaker said today it has paid out $16.5 million U.S. to people that had bet on Joe Biden becoming the next U.S. president, even though the official result is still to be determined. Former Vice President Biden said he is headed to victory, though Donald Trump has claimed that he has won and is pursuing lawsuits and a recount. Still, Sportsbet said it has paid out more than 100,000 bets laid on a Biden victory. We have supreme confidence that Biden will end up in the Oval Office, a spokesman for the Australian bookmakers said. Well, the gamblers know. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, and you do know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on And we're going to meet up tomorrow for a Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, and maybe we might have a new president of the United States. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we're going to meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver.